The footage started with nothing unusual, just another quiet night in the underground parking lot of the office building where I work security. I had done this job for 7 years, and if there was one thing I'd learned, it was that CCTV never lied. Cameras didn't exaggerate, didn't hallucinate, didn't scream. They simply showed the truth, whether you liked it or not. And sometimes, the truth was the last thing you wanted to see. It was 2:17 a.m. when I noticed motion on camera 12, the one covering the farthest corner of the basement, an area no one used because the lights flickered constantly. People joked that it was haunted. I never laughed with them. The first time I checked that camera on my first week, I thought I saw someone kneeling by the pillar, but when I zoomed in, there was nothing there. Just static. I convinced myself it was dust or compression artifacts. You learn to ignore oddities if you want to stay sane. But tonight, there was no ignoring this. Something was moving along the floor, sliding, not walking. At first glance, it looked like a person crawling, but the limbs were wrong. Too long, too thin, bending in directions that didn't match any human anatomy. I leaned closer. The figure paused under the flickering bulb, and for a second, the light illuminated its face. My stomach twisted. It wasn't a face at all. It was smooth, featureless, like a mannequin head dipped in shadow. But the worst part? The head tilted sharply, as if it sensed the camera and was listening. I rewound, played again, rewound, played again. Each time, the head snapped up slightly earlier, as if recognizing my attention. That's impossible, I told myself. Cameras don't transmit awareness. Then the thing began crawling toward the elevator. My heart dropped. The elevator was on for maintenance, meaning its door was slightly ajar. A gap big enough for something small, or something that could flatten itself like wet cloth. The creature slid through the narrow opening and disappeared inside. Camera 12 lost it, but camera 7, inside the elevator, picked it up. The footage was distorted, shaky, like the creature's presence interfered with the digital feed. It pressed its body against the corner, flattening impossibly thin. The shape trembled, as though struggling to hold itself together. Then the elevator doors began closing. I didn't press anything. No one did. They shut. The elevator rose. I stared helplessly at the monitor tracking its movement. Floor 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. It stopped on 5, the only floor with night staff working. Before the doors opened, the elevator camera glitched violently. Lines, static, flickers of white and black. But one frame was clear, too clear. A distorted face pressed directly against the lens. No features except a single, stretched open mouth. I slammed the alarm button. By the time I reached the 5th floor with 2 other guards, the corridor was silent. Lights flickering, cold breeze. The elevator stood open, empty. But down the hall, we found Jeremy, the janitor, a friendly guy who'd been mopping floors for years. He was slumped against the wall, staring at nothing, mouth hanging open like his jaw had been dislocated. He wasn't dead, but he wasn't normal either. He kept whispering the same thing, over and over. It's learning, it knows the cameras. We checked the security footage from that hallway to see what happened. We shouldn't have. The thing slid out of the elevator, approached Jeremy, and wrapped itself around him, like a living shadow, swallowing his outline. Then it turned toward the camera. Its shape rippled into the blurry silhouette of a human, then clearer, then sharper. The first sign that something was wrong came from the tenants on the 9th floor. They kept complaining about someone knocking on doors at 3 a.m., but when they looked through the peephole, no one was there. At first, the building management assumed it was a prankster. Then an elderly resident claimed she heard the knocking come from inside the walls. That's when my boss asked me, the tech guy, to check the CCTV. I started with the hallway footage from past week. Nothing at first, just quiet corridors, motionless doors, occasional residents passing through. But on the fourth night, at exactly 3:02 a.m., the camera picked something up. A tall, pale figure stood completely still at the far end of the hallway. Its limbs were too long, its shoulders unnaturally sharp, and its head hung at an angle that suggested a broken neck. But the strangest thing was how it moved, or it didn't move. Even as the hallway lights flickered, the figure stayed perfectly static, like it wasn't affected by the environment at all, like it existed separately from the footage. At 3:04 a.m., it took a single step. Not a normal step. It jumped forward in distance. One frame, it was 20 feet away. The next, it was 10 feet closer. No in-between motion. No walking captured. Cameras don't skip frames unless the feed is interrupted. But every diagnostic showed the system was fully operational. Then the knocking started. The figure shifted to the first door. It raised its hand, and in a single frame, its fist was touching the wood. A soft knock echoed, captured faintly by the hallway mic. 3 slow knuckles. The tenant, Mr. Hartman, looked through his peephole. The figure snapped its head toward the camera, not toward the door, toward the CCTV itself. I froze. Somehow it knew I was watching, or maybe it always knew. Mr. Hartman didn't open the door. Thank God he didn't. The figure continued down the hallway. It knocked on each door, pausing long enough to be heard but not seen by anyone inside. At the last door, the camera glitched. Not static, something stranger. For a moment, the footage repeated itself, like the timeline warped. The figure knocked, turned its head, then the video looped back 2 seconds and showed the same motion again. But the second time, its head turned slightly slower, as if watching me more carefully. I scrubbed through the footage again. Same loop, same anomaly, same unnatural awareness. The next night, I monitored the feed live. Exactly at 3:02 a.m., the hallway lights flickered and the figure appeared again. It didn't fade in or walk in a frame. It simply existed suddenly. I held my breath, leaning closer. Its head twitched. Then slowly, deliberately, it lifted one arm and pointed straight at the camera. At me. I should have erased the footage. Instead, I watched it again and again until the images carved themselves into my mind. It all began when my boss asked me to sort through old security footage from a cold storage warehouse we were contracted to provide monitoring for. The building was massive, 3 floors of freezers, loading docks, and echoing corridors. Nothing ever happened there, but insurance required constant recording. One Sunday night, while reviewing backups from 2 months earlier, I noticed something odd on camera F19. The warehouse floor was empty except for a few stacked crates. But in the corner of the frame, a shape flickered, not like a digital glitch, but like something phasing in and out of existence. I zoomed in. It was a person. A man wearing a heavy coat, hunched forward, face obscured. But the strange part was how his body moved. He paced between 2 crates, but each step stuttered unnaturally. The camera captured him in broken increments, like reality lagged around him. I checked the corresponding cameras. F17, F18, F20. Nothing. The man only appeared on one camera. Then, at 1:41 a.m., he stopped pacing. His head lifted slowly, too slowly, and he stared directly at the lens. The warehouse was supposed to be empty. No workers, no deliveries, no one on duty. I switched to the live feed of camera F19. The man was still there, moving. The temperature gauge next to the video display flickered, dropping rapidly from 34 degree F, 22 degree F, 15 degree F, 3 degree F, until the reading flatlined. A chill spread through the monitoring room. The vents hissed as if exhaling cold breath. On screen, the man raised his arm and pointed toward the camera. Not at the warehouse, at the camera, at me. Then he mouthed something. The feed was silent, but I could read the shape of the word. Help. Against my better judgment, I alerted my supervisor, who told me to send a guard to check. But the guard radioed back minutes later, saying the warehouse was completely empty. No man, no footprints, no disturbed crates. When I looked back at the footage, the figure had moved. Now he stood directly under the camera, staring up at the lens from inches away. His face was a blur, smudged, stretched, like it was being erased mid-frame. The lights in the warehouse flickered. The guard's voice cracked through the radio. Control? The lights are going out. The line cut into static. On the monitors, every camera flashed white. When the image returned, the man was no longer alone. There were now dozens of figures, identical copies, standing in rows between the crates. Every one of them faced the cameras. Every one of them pointed.